You used to believe life had a shape. Wake up. Work. Dream a little. Try to become someone. There was structure, maybe not purpose, but momentum. Then something broke. You didn't plan it, you didn't ask for it. But one day, something inside you woke up. And instead of clarity, you found a void. People call it spiritual awakening, but the truth is, awakening isn't light pouring into your life, it's the light revealing how dark things really are. You start seeing through the scripts, through the roles everyone plays, through your own lies, and the more you see, the less you can pretend. At first, you feel powerful, like you've escaped a prison everyone else is still trapped in. But soon, that power turns to sickness, because freedom without direction feels like drowning in open sea. That's when the motivation dies. You stop caring about what once moved you: money, status, ambition, validation. You can't force yourself to play games that now look meaningless. This is the paradox of awakening. You see the truth, but the truth paralyzes you. When you awaken, you meet yourself stripped of illusion. And that self is not heroic, not divine, not radiant. It's raw, confused, unfinished. You start noticing how every dream you had was just survival dressed up as meaning. Your goals weren't truly yours, they were borrowed. You were running on inherited scripts. Get somewhere. Become something, prove you exist. Now, those scripts collapse. You're awake in a burnt-out theater, and the actors are gone, the stage lights dim. The applause never comes. You look around and whisper, "What now?" That's the quiet terror no one warns you about. The end of illusion isn't peace, it's emptiness. And yet, this is where the real journey begins. Most people think enlightenment means bliss. They imagine you sit cross-legged under trees, smiling into the horizon, vibrating with universal love. But true awakening is much less romantic. It's the collapse of everything that once held you together. It's the realization that meaning was never out there. It was something you manufactured to keep yourself sane. And when that illusion dissolves, the machinery of your motivation shuts down. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You've simply seen too much to be fooled again. That's what Kierkegaard meant when he said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur so quietly that it's almost like not losing anything at all." The self you lose is the false one, but before the true one emerges, you pass through an inner death, and death never feels like awakening. It feels like nothing matters anymore. In this stage, even small tasks feel impossible. You sit there, staring at your goals, and every part of you whispers, "Why bother?" You could chase success, but to what end? You could find yourself, but isn't the self just another mask? You start questioning everything. Every purpose dissolves into infinite regress. Every answer folds back into another question. You realize how absurd existence is, how fragile meaning is. That's the moment when Nietzsche's words hit like prophecy. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But what if your why has died? Without a why, life becomes unbearable, and yet, here you are, bearing it. Somehow, that's the strange part. Even when motivation dies, something in you refuses to give up completely. It's faint, hidden, almost imperceptible, but it's there, the silent witness, watching everything fall apart. That's the beginning of true awareness. You see, the old version of you was addicted to becoming. You were always chasing the next step, the next identity, achievement, or validation. But awakening pulls you into being. And being is terrifying when you've lived your whole life running from yourself. In stillness, the noise fades. Distractions die. And what's left is raw existence. No story, no goal, no direction. That's why motivation disappears. Because awakening forces you to stop running. You've lived your whole life sprinting away from emptiness, and now emptiness is all that's left. But there's something sacred about that. You're facing what most people spend their lives avoiding. You've stepped into the desert of the self, and in that desert, you either dissolve or evolve. At this point, you might feel detached from people, from dreams, from life itself. You might even think you've regressed. But detachment isn't regression. It's decomposition. The self you used to be is rotting, and that's a good thing. Growth isn't always blooming, sometimes it's decay. Jung called this the night sea journey, the descent into the unconscious, where the old ego dies and the true psyche begins to form. It's brutal, lonely, and deeply disorienting. You're not losing motivation because something's wrong with you, you're losing motivation because your old motives were lies. And until you face that death fully, you'll stay in limbo, too awake to go back, too lost to move forward. This is where people either break or transform, because the mind starts looking for a way out. It wants to feel normal again. Some go back to their illusions, pretending nothing happened. Others escape into distractions, spirituality as an aesthetic, endless healing, or nihilism. But a few, very few, stay in the void long enough to see what's underneath, and that's where meaning starts to rebuild itself. The truth is, awakening isn't supposed to motivate you. It's supposed to strip away everything false so that what's real can emerge. Motivation isn't gone, it's just being purified. You've been running on fear, validation, and conditioning for so long that the soul needed to crash the system. It's like clearing malware from a machine. Everything stops working, but only because the system's finally being cleaned. So don't mistake stillness for death. It's gestation. You're not failing. You're incubating. Most people never get here. They wake up just enough to feel discomfort, then scramble to rebuild the same old life under a new label: spiritual, aligned, purpose-driven. But that's just the ego wearing a halo. You, on the other hand, are sitting in the ruins, and that's exactly where you need to be, because only when the old motivation dies can real desire, real fire, be born. You're not supposed to be productive right now, you're supposed to learn how to exist without pretending. And that's the hardest thing any human can do. You used to think life was a climb, one step leading to the next. But awakening shows you that the mountain you've been climbing doesn't lead anywhere. You reach a plateau and realize there is no summit, no finish line, just an endless horizon of sky and silence. That's the existential vacuum. The moment you realize that the stories we tell ourselves, about purpose, success, even love, are scaffolding built over chaos. And once you see through them, you can't unsee them. It's not depression. It's disillusionment, the painful clarity of seeing reality without its makeup on. People around you still chase, still cling, still pretend. You can't. You've seen the machinery behind the curtain. You've watched your own motivations rot in your hands. The things that once made you feel alive now taste like dust. You used to chase goals because they gave you a sense of continuity. Now you see that continuity was an illusion. You were never moving forward, just in circles. When the illusion of meaning collapses, the ego loses its anchor. It doesn't know how to function without a story. The mind panics. It tries to resurrect old ambitions. It whispers, maybe I just need a new goal, a new dream, a new version of myself, but none of it sticks. You can't unknow what you know. Every new path feels recycled, another layer of disguise over the same void, and that's when you start to feel the true weight of consciousness. It's not pain, exactly. It's heaviness, the burden of seeing too much. You begin to understand why people stay asleep, because awakening isn't bliss. It's exile. You no longer belong to the old world of illusions, but you haven't yet entered the new one. You are suspended between two realities, too awake to fit in, too disoriented to move forward. This is where nihilism creeps in. It whispers, nothing matters. And in a way, it's right. The universe doesn't owe you meaning. The world doesn't revolve around your desires, but nihilism is only half the truth. It's what happens when you destroy meaning but don't rebuild it. You've cleared the ground, but you haven't planted anything new, and until you do, the emptiness will eat you alive. Nietzsche called this the death of God, not the literal God, but the death of absolute meaning, the collapse of everything that told us who we are and why we exist. When that God dies, the world becomes weightless. Every value floats without anchor, and you, the awakened one, are left holding the fragments. But here's the paradox: to truly rebuild, you must let yourself disintegrate first. That's what Jung called individuation, the process of confronting the unconscious, facing the shadow, and integrating the fragments of the self. It's not a feel-good journey. It's psychological crucifixion. You will lose yourself before you find yourself. You will question your sanity. You will feel like a ghost wandering through the ruins of your own mind. But every great transformation begins in ruins. Alchemy, the ancient metaphor Jung loved, starts with nigredo, the black stage, where everything putrefies and dissolves. Only then can gold be born. You are in your nigredo, don't rush it. Don't try to escape it. This darkness isn't punishment. It's purification. Here's the secret no one tells you: motivation dies because the ego was never built to handle truth. The ego survives on fiction, goals, desires, identity. When truth enters, the ego short-circuits. You can't go back to chasing empty dreams, but you also can't yet act from a higher truth. You're caught in the in-between. That's why this phase feels like death, because the you that used to run your life is actually dying. It's a psychological funeral, and every illusion you ever held is being lowered into the ground. At this stage, many people mistake apathy for peace. They confuse detachment with enlightenment. They think not caring about anything means they've transcended the world. But that's another illusion, the illusion of the numb. Real transcendence isn't escape. It's integration. It's learning to live within the absurd, not outside it. Camus called it revolt. He said that once you see life's absurdity, you have two choices: suicide or rebellion. And rebellion doesn't mean changing the world, it means saying yes to it, even when it makes no sense. That yes is the first spark of new motivation. Not the ego's hunger for validation, but the soul's quiet decision to live, despite everything. You might notice strange moments of calm. They come without reason. You'll be washing dishes, or walking outside, and for a moment, you'll feel a quiet clarity, like something in you has stopped struggling. That's the soul adjusting to reality. You're learning to live without a why. To exist, not as a project, but as presence. It's not enlightenment yet, it's stabilization, the moment you stop fighting the void and start breathing inside it. And from that stillness, something ancient begins to stir, a whisper beneath the silence, a spark beneath the ash. Not the old motivation, not ambition or fear, but a raw, primal will to exist, not for purpose, not for outcome, just because you are here. It's strange how awareness transforms pain. The same emptiness that once crushed you begins to feel spacious. The same silence that felt like suffocation begins to sound like music. You start noticing beauty again, but not as escape. You notice it because you've stopped trying to capture it. You're no longer demanding life give you meaning. You're watching life be meaning. That's the first step toward freedom. Not control. Not mastery, but surrender. You don't become detached from the world. You stop clinging to it. And in that subtle shift, the soul begins to breathe again. Still, don't romanticize it. You'll swing between peace and despair for a while. The psyche heals in spirals, not straight lines. You'll think you've arrived, only to fall back into confusion. You'll think you've understood, only to realize understanding itself is another illusion. But each descent brings you deeper, each collapse clears another layer of falsehood. You're not regressing, you're refining. You're learning the rhythm of transformation, and the deeper you go, the more you realize this process isn't about finding answers, it's about burning everything that isn't real. Until only truth remains, most people think they want awakening. What they really want is comfort dressed as insight, but true awakening demands sacrifice, the sacrifice of certainty, of self, of all the stories that made you feel safe. You've stepped into a process that has no turning back, and yes, it will test you. You'll feel like you've lost everything, but what's really happening is subtraction, the peeling away of all that isn't truly you. When everything false has been stripped away, what remains isn't nothing. It's something eternal, you. Unmasked, you're learning how to live in a world that doesn't hand you meaning. You're learning how to stand alone, naked before existence, and that's not despair. That's power. You are discovering that you don't need a reason to exist, existence itself is the reason. That realization doesn't come as a lightning strike. It comes slowly, painfully, through the unraveling of everything you thought life was supposed to be, but once you see it, you never forget it. It's the moment you stop searching for meaning, and start creating it. You wake up one morning, and the emptiness is still there. The world hasn't changed. The sky looks the same. The people around you still chase their routines, but something in you has shifted, not forward, not backward, but deeper. You're no longer searching for the high of awakening, the thrill of new insight. You're learning the harder lesson, how to carry awareness, because awakening gives you vision. But consciousness gives you weight. You start to realize that seeing the truth isn't the hard part, living with it is. The more awake you become, the heavier life feels. You see the absurdity in everything, the desperate busyness of people trying to prove they matter, the endless pursuit of pleasure as distraction, the way culture disguises emptiness as success. You see it all clearly now, and it's unbearable at times, because once you've seen through illusion, you can't return to innocence. You can only move forward, into a new kind of strength. That's why Camus said, "There is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night." You know the night now. You've lived in it, and that's why the light, when it finally returns, won't blind you anymore. But before that light comes, you have to survive the middle. This is the stage where people lose themselves in quiet despair. They know too much to go back, but not enough to move forward. It's the psychological wasteland, a place of silent breakdowns, meaningless days, and unshakable fatigue. You wake up with no energy, no drive, no spark. The mind whispers, "What's the point?" Every small effort feels like lifting a mountain. That's the weight of consciousness pressing down on you. It's not punishment, it's friction. You're grinding against reality, trying to find a new way to live inside it. The old operating system is gone, but the new one hasn't installed yet, so everything freezes. And in that stillness, you begin to see what truly moves you. At this point, you start to understand something strange about motivation. It was never pure. You were motivated by fear, fear of failure, fear of insignificance, fear of being unseen. You were motivated by desire, for validation, control, pleasure, power. But all those forces belong to the ego, and when the ego dies, those motivations die with it. You're left empty-handed, but also clean, because now, something else can emerge. Real motivation, the kind that doesn't burn out, doesn't come from wanting more. It comes from accepting what is. You stop chasing your life and start inhabiting it. You no longer want to escape pain, you want to understand it. You no longer crave meaning, you begin to embody it. That's the subtle turning point where awareness becomes alchemy. The fire you're looking for isn't outside you. It's buried under the ashes of your old self. You find it when you stop running from the void and start listening to it. In this silence, the world begins to speak again, not in words, in symbols. The wind brushing against your face, the sound of rain on windows, the small, forgotten details of existence. You begin to feel life directly again, not through ambition, but through presence. The simplest acts become sacred. Drinking water, breathing deeply, standing under the sun. This is what Jung called reconnection with the self, the reunion of the conscious and the unconscious. You realize that motivation was never supposed to be a whip, it's supposed to be a whisper. The whisper grows stronger the quieter you become, because now, you're not forcing life, you're aligning with it. You no longer need to invent meaning, you notice it everywhere, in the struggle, in the silence, in the imperfection of being alive. That's when the fire returns, not the raging fire of ambition, but the steady flame of purpose. You start to care again, but differently. You care not because you want something from life, but because you finally see that life is something worth wanting. Still, this new fire is delicate. The ego will try to hijack it, to turn it into another identity. I'm spiritual now. I'm awakened. I'm above the chaos. That's the ego resurrecting itself in holy robes. you have to be vigilant, because every time you think you've figured it out, you're slipping back into illusion. True awakening doesn't crown you. It humbles you. It's not about becoming superior. It's about becoming real, and reality is quiet, simple, and endlessly mysterious. As you adjust to this, you'll start to notice a shift in your relationship with suffering. Before, suffering was something to avoid. Now, you start to see it as teacher, because pain doesn't always mean something's wrong, sometimes it means something true is trying to emerge. The discomfort you feel is psychological stretching, your soul expanding into a larger frame of being. It's the cost of consciousness. That's why Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." You pay for every inch of awareness with a little blood, but what you gain in return is incomparable. Freedom. Freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the absence of illusion. It's the ability to feel everything, joy, grief, confusion, emptiness, without being destroyed by it. It's the courage to stand in the middle of contradiction and say, yes, this too. That's the moment when the void stops feeling like nothingness, it starts feeling like potential. The same emptiness that once frightened you becomes the canvas you paint meaning on. You realize that the world was never meaningless, it was neutral. Meaning was always your brush, your color, your hand. This is the rebirth. Not dramatic, not loud, but steady and inward. You begin to rebuild your life, not from ambition, but from awareness. You choose not because you must, but because you can. You work, not to prove your worth, but to express your existence. You act, not to escape death, but to honor life. That's the highest form of motivation, one that doesn't depend on reward or recognition. It's the motivation that emerges when you realize that life itself is the miracle. But don't think this realization makes you untouchable. You will still have bad days. You will still feel lost. That's part of being alive. Awakening doesn't end struggle, it refines it. You stop fighting life, and start wrestling with it, like Jacob wrestling the angel, knowing that the wound you carry afterward is proof of contact with the divine. That wound is sacred. It's the mark of the soul that dared to wake up. You will find yourself drawn to new kinds of purpose. Not the noisy, goal-driven kind, but quiet service, creation, healing, teaching, understanding. You begin to notice that life moves through you, not for you. You become a vessel for something greater. Call it consciousness, spirit, truth, or simply existence itself. And for the first time, action feels natural again, not forced, not pressured, just aligned. That's the return of authentic motivation, born not from the mind, but from the depths of being. By now, you've stopped asking, why am I not motivated? Because you understand that question belongs to the old self, the one who measured life by productivity. The new self doesn't chase motivation. It embodies it. You live because you are alive. You move because movement is part of the dance. You act because action is the natural rhythm of awareness. You no longer need a reason to exist. Existence is the reason, and that's where the fire truly lives, not in ambition, not in ego, but in the quiet pulse of being itself, the eternal heartbeat beneath all things. You found your fire again, not to burn others, but to illuminate the path ahead. You've walked through the ashes, you've faced the silence, you've watched your old life dissolve, and you didn't look away. Now, something new begins to take shape, not quickly, not loudly, but with the slow patience of a dawn that refuses to rush the sun. You're learning how to live again, not as a dreamer chasing illusions, but as a conscious being shaping reality. The awakening didn't give you meaning. It gave you the space to create it. At this stage, life feels different. You still go to work, talk to people, make plans. But the way you move through it all has changed. You're less reactive, less desperate, less attached to outcomes. You've stopped trying to control everything. Instead, you participate. Existence becomes collaboration, between your will and the world's unfolding. You act not from hunger, but from harmony. That's the quiet power of one who has faced the void and survived. But here's the secret, awakening doesn't end. It's not a finish line. It's a rhythm. A constant cycle of expansion, collapse, and rebirth. Every time you think you've figured it out, life will break your understanding again, not to punish you, to deepen you. The point isn't to escape illusion once and for all, but to learn how to see through it while still playing the game. Because even illusions have purpose. They give form to formlessness. They make experience possible. The awakened one doesn't reject illusion, they use it consciously. They know the story isn't real, and that's exactly what makes it beautiful. You start to rebuild meaning from this clarity, but it's not the kind of meaning you can measure or prove, it's meaning that emerges moment by moment, like music, something that only exists when you play it. You find meaning in effort, not achievement, in connection, not control, in creation, not consumption. The smallest act, done with awareness, becomes sacred. Even washing dishes can be an act of devotion if you're present enough to feel the water, the motion, the quiet, because now, you're not looking for purpose, you are purpose. You begin to sense something subtle but profound. You never lost motivation. You simply outgrew the kind that depends on illusion. The drive you feel now isn't about becoming something, it's about expressing what you already are. You don't work to earn worth, you work to reveal it. You don't create to prove yourself, you create to participate in the unfolding of reality. That's not motivation, it's resonance. You're aligned with something larger than the ego. You move because life moves through you. And that's when life becomes art. You stop seeing yourself as a character trying to win, and start seeing yourself as a painter, shaping color from chaos. You know the canvas will never be finished, you know time will erase your work. But you paint anyway, because the act of creating is the reward. Camus called this the absurd hero. He said that even when life is meaningless, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, pushing his stone up the hill, not because it matters, but because it's his hill. That's what you've become, someone who knows the futility of it all, and yet chooses to live fully anyway. That's strength, that's freedom. Once you reach this point, people will notice something different about you. You'll move slower, speak less, but your words will carry weight. You won't chase validation anymore, but strangely, you'll attract respect. Because authenticity has gravity, you've stopped performing, and that silence draws people in more powerfully than any speech. They'll feel something in you, a calm that doesn't come from ignorance, but from integration. You're not above life. You're within it. That's what true awakening looks like, not detachment from the world, but immersion in it, with your eyes wide open. Now you begin to rebuild relationships, work, and creativity from a new center. You no longer ask, what do I want to get? You ask, what do I want to give? Because the paradox of awakening is this: the more you dissolve the self, the more selfless joy becomes possible. When the ego ruled, every act was transaction. Now, every act is transmission. You give freely, not because you have to, but because you can, and that giving becomes the new form of motivation, not desire, but overflow. Sometimes you'll miss the old fire, the ambition, the hunger, the urgency, but you'll realize that intensity without direction is just combustion. Now your fire burns slower, deeper, steadier. It doesn't consume you, it sustains you. You become the keeper of your own inner flame, and with that flame, you light your path forward. You also begin to notice that awakening doesn't make you perfect. You still get angry, you still make mistakes, you still doubt yourself, but now, you don't identify with it. You don't collapse into shame, you see your emotions as weather, transient, instructive, part of the landscape. You can feel rage without becoming rage, you can feel sadness without drowning in it. That's mastery, not control, but capacity. The ability to contain contradiction without falling apart, and in that capacity, you rediscover meaning in the most unexpected places, a conversation that feels real, a sunset that stops you mid-sentence, a moment of laughter that breaks through your silence. You realize life never stopped being sacred, you just stopped being able to see it. Now, vision has returned. Not naive, not idealistic, but honest. You know life will end, you know nothing lasts, but instead of despairing, You bow to it. You've made peace with impermanence, and that peace is the purest form of motivation there is, because when you truly accept death, every breath becomes a miracle. From this acceptance, a quiet joy begins to bloom. It's not euphoria. It's not constant. It's the kind of joy that doesn't depend on mood or circumstance. It's gratitude for existence itself, the fact that anything is, when nothing could have been. You begin to live in reverence. You look at the chaos and see art. You look at the pain and see growth. You look at yourself, flawed, fragile, unfinished, and you see enough. You realize you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness includes every fracture, every failure, every scar. So now, when people ask, how do I find motivation after awakening? You smile, because you know the truth. You don't find motivation. You become it. Motivation isn't something you chase. It's something that flows through you when you stop pretending and start living. You become a channel for life itself, and life, despite everything, despite absurdity, despite suffering, always wants to move forward. You are that movement, you are that breath, you are that eternal spark in human form. So maybe you don't need to figure everything out, maybe you don't need to fix yourself or plan every step, maybe all you need to do is show up, here, now, awake. That's the real awakening, not cosmic visions or transcendence, but presence, not escaping the human condition, but embodying it completely. You don't need to become enlightened, you just need to stop abandoning yourself in every moment. That's the end of seeking, that's the beginning of living. So when you wake up tomorrow and feel that familiar emptiness, don't panic, don't think you've lost your way. That emptiness is space, the sacred ground of creation. Every moment you exist, the universe looks through your eyes and gets to experience itself. That's not meaningless. That's magnificent. You are not here to understand life, you are here so life can understand itself. And maybe, that's all the meaning you'll ever need, not the meaning that promises reward, but the meaning that comes from breathing, seeing, being. That's enough, that's always been enough, because the truth is, after awakening, you don't need motivation, you are the motivation, the witness, the creator, the fire, and from that fire, you begin again.